Morning, everybody. I am Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And thank you for joining us today for Business Over Breakfast. Happy Thanksgiving wishes to everybody for next week, for those in the US that celebrate Thanksgiving. Ever since COVID-19 pandemic first struck, workers have been introspective about their careers. The Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, call it whatever you like, saw people leaving jobs that they found unfulfilling. And some of those people just never came back into the workplace. In a landscape of shifting employee priorities, people want to derive value, satisfaction, and a sense of ongoing momentum from their working lives. At the same time, organizations are increasingly requiring us to have the agility and ability to close skill gaps. Both of these challenges can be met by actively taking charge of your career. And while that can feel like a daunting task, with the right tools, planning, principles, and vigilance, you can be empowered to realize your full career potential. Whether you're looking to advance in your current company or make a career pivot, or like me, just stay current in what is a very fast changing workplace, there are universal elements to career management that enable you to drive your career in the direction you want. I'm really pleased to have Liz Chilla, Senior Director and full-time for the full-time programs in the MBA Career and Management Center, and Danielle Rubenstein, the Director of Career Management for Alumni and MBA Working Professional students, to lead today's discussion. Liz oversees the career education, coaching, and programming for Goizueta's 2-year MBAs and 1-year MBA programs. And Danielle Rubenstein has been providing coaching support and resources to professionals at all levels regarding career development initiatives for, I'm not going to say that number, for many, many years. Currently, Danielle leads the Career Management Center for Alumni and Working Professionals, as I said. Liz and Danielle are going to talk about rethinking your career today, and are going to spend 30 to 35 minutes exploring this topic, how to put yourself in the driver's seat for your career and stay there. And then this will be followed by 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar at any time, and we will do our best to get to as many of those as possible. So enjoy your time with Danielle and Liz. Enjoy your turkey if you're going to eat turkey next week. And I look forward to seeing you again on December 1st for the next Business Over Breakfast. Danielle and Liz, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Good morning, everyone. We're so glad to have you here today with us. We appreciate that introduction. I think you gave a great overview of what it is that we are going to cover today in this session. I think for Danielle and I, career changes and taking charge of your career is always timely and top of mind because of the work that we're doing with students and alumni every day. And so we're hoping that throughout today's session, we'll be able to break down the key elements of taking charge of your career so that you all can be thinking about next steps on your own. I know Nicola did introduce us, but we will briefly kind of share just a little bit more about what we do in the Graduate Career Management Center at Goizueta Business School. Again, my name is Liz Chilla. I've been here at Goizueta for about 7 years. I started here as a career coach, working with full-time MBA students who were going into somewhat non-traditional careers, so things outside of the traditional finance, marketing, and consulting roles that a lot of MBAs go into. And now I lead all of the full-time MBA advising for our 2-year and our 1-year MBA programs. And I'll let my colleague Danielle introduce herself as well.
Thanks so much, Liz. And I'm Danielle Rubenstein. I will say the number, but I appreciate that Nicola was trying to go on the down low about that. I've been at Goizueta for over 20 years and served in multiple roles. Most recently, I'm the Senior Director for the Working Professional students, which are the evening and executive MBA students, as well as alumni from all of the different programs. And as Liz mentioned, we really focus on all aspects of career, whether that's advancing in your career or making a career pivot. And we're happy to be here today to talk through different frameworks and different things you need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Danielle. So, as we were talking about how we wanted to focus this session and structure this session, I think it's really about key takeaways. The goal of this session and the time that we have is to make sure that when you leave at the end of this hour or so this morning, you feel like you have some actionable and tangible things that you'll be able to do as you think about the next steps in your career. So by the end of this session, we hope that you will be able to better understand your career priorities and professional strengths, be able to expand your career resource library, and we'll give you at the end of the session links to some key assessments and other websites that can be helpful to do some of that reflection on your own. And then we'll also give you a chance to be thinking about clear next steps for your personal career journey. And I think, as we consider how we're going to focus on this session, all of you may be in different stages at your career, but as Nicola mentioned, there are going to be universal elements to be thinking about what that next step is going to be for you, whether you're hoping to stay within your current company and advance or move to something completely different. We want to make sure you're given the tools to do that in a successful and effective way. To get things started, I really would like to hear a bit more from you on where you are at right now with your career. So you'll see here I wrote down what is one word that describes how you're feeling about your career today. We have the code and a QR code and the link to Menti. We'd like to hear a little bit about how you're feeling today regarding your career. So please scan this code or go to menti.com and type in this numerical code here. I'm going to switch over to that slide in just a second, but I'd love to see a little bit about how you all are feeling today regarding your career. I'm going to pull that up right now. I'm going to assume that everybody's had a chance to get that in the chat or be able to scan the code. Okay. See a lot of things coming in: worried, transitioning, stagnant, stalled, optimistic, I like it, scattered, energized, conflicted. I mean, these are such common things I feel like we hear, don't you think, Danielle?
Oh, totally. It's all over the map, and it's
Stretched.
different stages.
Yeah.
Stressed, lost, stuck, loving it. Yep. And Justin, in case you had any trouble, Justin just put in the chat the link and the code. So if we haven't heard from you yet, please feel free to tap on that and start entering your words. So cautiously optimistic, a little bit of a pull and a push there. So yeah, all over the place. And I think no matter where you are, these tools and frameworks we're going to share this morning will help you to figure out a plan to move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really helpful to see some of these, and people keep putting them in so many different words that Danielle and I were kind of reflecting on this before we did this session, wondering what are all the different things that people are going to be writing here. And this is more than we could have even guessed. So a lot of people looking maybe to make some kind of transition or at least reflect on what is most important to them. So this is very
and the biggest words, which is interesting: confused, conflicted, discouraged. So there's some hard things happening in people's worlds related to their career right now.
Absolutely. Well, Danielle, if it works for you, I think we got a good sense of where where kind of people are feeling in terms of their career. I'm going to go back to sharing a bit more about how we can think about the next step. So as we mentioned, as you're thinking about the next step in your career, there are a few key elements of successful career planning. Regardless of whether you're looking to make a significant career pivot or maybe advancing the current job that you're in, we think that there are three main elements that you can consider and focus on in order to be able to effectively plan for the next stage of your career. And that is first, understanding yourself. Danielle will get into that in just a minute. Understanding the market, which is, I think, particularly important now, understanding where there's opportunity to grow, and then understanding where you want to go. So after you have a chance to know yourself and know the market, then how do you understand your goals and set actionable goals for yourself? So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to talk a little bit about this key aspect at the beginning, which is understanding yourself.
Thanks so much, Liz. So it really does start, career planning starts with really understanding who you are. And there's three different buckets that we like to give you in terms of understanding yourself in a broader sense. So it's your skills, your values, and your interests. And the reason that this is so important is because you want to be intentional and be able to drive your career in the direction that's going to fit you. And we'll say this throughout the presentation, but things can shift throughout your career. You know, what you want in your 20s can vary very much from what you want in your 30s and 40s and 50s. And so it's important to do this reflection on an ongoing basis, especially if what we saw, you're feeling stuck, you're feeling uncertain, you're not sure exactly where you fit. You know, there's conflict that's going on. It really does start with doing that self-reflection of what's important to me, what am I interested in, what am I best at? And by starting here, it keeps you focused on what really matters to you, because everybody's career journey is personal. What somebody else is doing is not relevant to you. So it's important to stay in your lane, so to speak, and stay focused on somebody else may be wanting to work, 12 hours a day and making a lot of money. And those are things that are really great. And that could work well for them. And then maybe for you, it's more about work-life balance. Maybe it's vice versa. So it really does start with what is important to me and how do I drive that train forward. The other thing about making decisions and really analyzing what's important is it allows you to prioritize your time. I saw on that Menti that you may feel stretched, you may feel overwhelmed, you're feeling like you don't have enough time to do all the things that matter. And so starting with what is important to me allows you to focus in on what you want to spend your time doing. And so you don't feel as stretched. You don't feel like you've got to cast as wide of a net to really figure out, what is next for me. So that prioritization is really important. So when starting with reflecting on your values in terms of what's important to you, one of the quotes that Liz and I really love is from Brené Brown, and it's values are the beliefs that are most important to you, that help you find your way in the dark, that fill you with a feeling of purpose. Hopefully many of you know Brené Brown and the wonderful resources that she provides, but starting with your values is starting with your North Star. And really understanding what am I looking for in my career? And I'm seeing a chat come in. I'm going to look at that in a second. But what is important to me and how does that drive my career choices? And so we've provided a list of different values here that can help you to think through, what is it really something that is my North Star in my career. And I'll give you an example. So for me, I've, a few different really important values, but one that comes to mind is collaboration. So I love brainstorming, I love innovating, but I like to do it with other people. I like to be able to talk through ideas and, what are challenges that some of my colleagues are facing and how are they navigating through those challenges? And how do I share things that are happening for me to help them? And so that's something that I know is really important to me in my work, and that would help to drive satisfaction and connection. So when I'm looking for something or, evaluating my current situation, how much is that playing a part? Because that's going to be really important for me to understand, to know if this is a fit for me. Liz, what's one of your important values?
Yeah, I always think about purpose as a value in my career, like as I've been in higher ed for many years. And so thinking about kind of the greater good that I am able to do in a role in higher ed. It's probably why it ends up in a career coaching role, thinking about the purpose is guiding others towards their path. So that is something that I always consider as I'm looking to advance in any kind of role.
Yeah, so those are just two examples. You see other ones on the screen here, but we want to hear from you. So when you're thinking about what's important, again, your personal journey, what are some values that come to mind that resonate with you? Feel free to type in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Authenticity, integrity, balance, man's search for meaning, growth. These are great. Learning new things. Yeah, so feeling like you're continuing to grow. Purpose, achievement, developing others. Oh, they're coming in so fast. Yeah. Respecting my team. Respect. Yes.
Being challenged. Learning. I love this. I mean, it's no surprise you're attending a business over breakfast session if learning is a key value of yours.
Developing others and mentoring. So these are great. So obviously this is coming in so fast. You all are aware of what your values are. That that checking in on how well is my value being met in my current situation is a really key point to being in that driver's seat for your career. And there's not just one, right? So there's a spreadsheet I use, there's a matrix I use oftentimes with alumni and students where we define their top 10 values and we prioritize them, and then we map them to different opportunities. And you start with your current role and you say, how well is my current role meeting these different needs and priorities that I have? And when you start to see the gaps, it creates some insights of, oh, that's why I'm so unhappy. Or you start to see alignment and you're like, oh, this is why this is such a great fit for me. So it's just a really great place to start. Thank you for participating. Those are great. Continue to think about it. So the second part of the understanding yourself is really reflecting on your skills and interests. And where the intersection is across values, skills, and interests is sort of your career North Star. And so when you start by looking at what are you good at and what are you interested in, the first thing that you consider is how your skills and interests align to both your current role or a new role. So you start by looking at, okay, I'm really good at problem solving. And right now I'm not doing a lot of problem solving in my role. It's all reactive. And, maybe there's problem solving involved in that, but I want to be more strategic. I want to be more proactive as opposed to reactive. And so what are some different opportunities that may allow you to use those skills? What are you interested in? What are you drawn to? What are you looking at on a regular basis? Thinking about things when you're reading articles or you're listening to podcasts, where are those interests intersecting with the type of work that you're doing? And so sometimes what you can do is you can look at your current role and see how well do my skills align with my current role? If there's a mismatch, then you can say, all right, well, what are potential other opportunities where my skills might be able to align better? And as you're looking at those new opportunities, you can see where are there potential gaps that may exist and what I need to get better at. I know a lot of you put in the chat, you're looking for continuous learning, you're looking for growth. And so creating that action plan, and we'll get into this more towards the end of the session. And I see some, what if a gap is just the experience itself? Great question. Then you start to create the action plan of how do you fill those gaps? How do you get that experience that you might need? So this could be earning certifications. It could be getting an MBA. It could be participating in executive education session. It could be sitting, on a business over breakfast. To that question specifically, Shri, I think it's a question of how can you potentially get that experience through volunteering, or could you do some sort of internship, on the side, 5 to 10 hours a week? Could you serve on a board where you're getting different exposure to different people that may mentor you? It really depends on what that experience is that you need. And so there's a variety of ways that you might be able to get that. We'll get into this more a lot down into the presentation as well, but sometimes there's transferable skills that you may not be recognizing that can really help position you for that experience, and it's how you're communicating your story. So without knowing all the details, those are just a few ideas of how you might be able to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the next piece of kind of doing research and understanding the market, but actually pulling online or out a job description of a role that you are interested in doing and looking at the skills and qualifications that are required for that role and doing an assessment, just like kind of this piece of paper that we have here on this slide. What are the skills that you already feel like you have? What are the skills that you need? And see if there are easy ways for you to fill in some of those gaps that don't require multiple years of work experience, but just exposure or an opportunity to work on a cross-functional project within your current company or volunteer for something, as Danielle mentioned. So there are ways to fill those gaps that may not require you to actually have done the job before, especially if that company is looking to hire more on potential than on specific experience. So that type of skills assessment, I think, can be really eye-opening when people compare it to their ideal job and their ideal job description. Yeah. So should I just jump into the next piece?
Yeah, go ahead. We're going to talk about understanding the market.
Sure. Yeah. So when we were talking about the importance of understanding yourself first, you want to know what your values, your skills, and your interests are. But then understanding the market is important because you have to understand even if you know what all your interests and skills and values are, you want to know what you're going to actually get paid to do. The ideal job is one that sits at the center of skills, interests, and opportunity. Because if you know that you have a skill and an interest in a certain area, but maybe that area isn't hiring at the moment, well, how does that play into how you think about your short-term and your long-term career goals? You want to be able to get paid for the things that you enjoy. I think that this is an important next step after you've done that reflection. And ways that you stay up to date on the market first starts with doing research on understanding hiring trends and where opportunities live. We work with students and with alumni on a regular basis. And some of the advice that I give students about hiring trends now could be different than what it looked like 2 and 3 years ago. And so staying current on hiring trends and opportunities and what the future of work looks like is incredibly important to make sure that you're going about a job search effectively. So when I think about doing this research, I usually think about it on both a macro level and a micro level. So on the macro level, it's about making sure that you are reading, consuming, listening to different types of news media that are related to business and maybe specifically the industry that you're most interested in. So say you are looking to grow your career in the Atlanta area because this is where you're located. Well, keeping up with our local business chronicles is incredibly important to understand where expansions are happening, where companies are growing, where an industry, may be taking shape in a way that it hadn't several years ago. I'm somebody that's always listening to podcasts. So sometimes the way that I stay current on certain industries, like things that are happening in higher ed or things that are happening that impact MBA hiring, is by listening to different podcasts related to that area. So that's how I, stay current in a way that's enjoyable on a regular basis. We've mentioned a few times how sessions like these can be really helpful. I've seen business over breakfast sessions that talk about things related to the state of the economy, the future of work. So it's a great way to stay current on what's happening, from the professors that are actively teaching these areas. So that's the macro level research, I think, that kind of helps to lay a groundwork for understanding where areas may be hiring in the specific interests that overlap with the specific interests that you have. Then you kind of take that down to micro level research to understand what's happening within your world and your network. And I would say the biggest and most effective tool that I coach my students on for micro level research is LinkedIn. I just think that it's such a wealth of information that can be used in different ways in order to understand what hiring looks like and how people move into certain career paths. So for an example, one of the things that I encourage students to do is, if you have an ideal role in mind, try to find people who are doing that job on LinkedIn and taking a look at what their career path was into that role. Did they move up within a certain company and industry in order to be able to gain skills and experience? Or maybe they worked in consulting for a few years and then made a transition into a higher level management role internal to a company. So using LinkedIn as a tool to understand and research different career paths, I think, is incredibly valuable.
And Liz, on
yes.
that point, I think it's such a good research tool like you're describing. And it also shows you that there's not one path to the same destination.
Yes.
So you'll see that there's multiple ways to get to where you might want to go by looking at different people's paths. And that can give you hope. So it can really help you understand, okay, I can take my own journey and my own path. It's really around networking and positioning yourself and understanding yourself, all of the things that we're talking about that can help you get to where you want to go. So I love that tool to be able
Absolutely.
to research career paths.
Yeah. And then I think what's nice about that is you start to identify people that are doing roles that you're interested in. And then you may start to see where there's overlap with people in your network. I know Danielle and I were talking a bit about this yesterday, but you kind of create a wish list for yourself of maybe contacts that you would like to reach out to and connect with in order to be able to see maybe where opportunities exist or just get general advice. I mean, I think the exposure piece of career advancement, talking to people, understanding their path, having them know who you are and what you're interested in, such an important part of effective career growth, is the interaction with other people. And it can be a tough thing to get started on, but if you break it down into, smaller goals, first starting to do your research, then identifying people within your network, and maybe starting with folks that are closer to you or former professional colleagues, it can make it a lot easier to go through that process.
And Liz, we had a question come in. I think it's a really great question around, is it important to stay in a company for long-term to grow? The company I work for has many long-term employees, while I'm only there for 5 years.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I don't think it is absolutely necessary to stay with one company in order to be able to grow. I've seen many people make those moves to other areas, and they move, out and up to another company. And so every time they're making a career move into another organization, they're able to step up into a higher level role, and capture some of the kind of hiring on potential growth opportunities that company is able to offer. And so it allows them maybe a quicker way to move up. That's one way to be thinking about your career. Certainly, if you really enjoy the current company that you're with and you're looking to grow within that company, then how do you maybe stretch yourself in order to be able to work more cross-functionally, have people know you within different departments of the organization, and just be able to acquire a network and a skill set that makes you more kind of interdisciplinary than maybe just the narrow path that you could be on at that moment. So I think there are different ways to consider growth. It can be within another organization or within the one that you have, but regardless, there's kind of a goal towards expansion of your skill set in some way.
Yeah,
that's the way that I would think about it.
Absolutely, Liz. And it goes back to what you want. Are you loving the current company? Is it aligned with your values? Are you seeing opportunities for you to grow? If you want to grow in the company, how are you networking? How are you self-promoting? How are you expanding your network? If you don't see long-term growth at your company, you want to get different experience, you're interested in a different industry, then moving, like Liz said, up and out is another option. So again, you'll hear us say it starts with you, and it really does determine what direction makes the most sense for you. Liz, there was a question. Somebody wanted to know what specific podcast you listen to.
Oh, I really enjoy, I don't know if anybody else has heard of a podcast called After Hours. It's some Harvard Business School professors that write about the topics that they're teaching, but also how it's impacting the students, the MBAs that they work with, and how they're thinking about their careers. So it's something that's particularly relevant to me because I'm working with MBAs. So the After Hours podcast I find really interesting. That's one that I enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're a podcast listener, Danielle.
Yeah, I've been listening to Freakonomics recently.
Oh yeah.
I really like that one a lot. So there's so many out there. Yeah. I think it's a lot to navigate through, but it's a very helpful.
And some companies will put out podcasts, on certain topics. And so if this is a piece of advice I always give my students. If you have a specific company that you're interested in working for, definitely check what different types of media they use. And if they have a podcast of their own, that could be a very important tool as you're preparing for networking conversations and job interviews with that company.
So much insight you can glean. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a few more questions coming in. So yes. Let's, again, I want to make sure, I think we'll get through the whole presentation, but I want to address everybody's questions. So should you take a role a few levels below or potentially including a pay cut if you're looking to pivot in a new area where you need the experience to help with the transition into a new industry?
I think that there are so many factors that drive this decision. And if a student that I was working with or one of our alumni was asking me this question, I think I would dig a little bit deeper into, how they're thinking about their overall long-term goals, how they're considering their values, if moving into transitioning to a different area is the main goal, and it's not about growth at that moment, but it's about making a transition, then I may look at that a little bit differently than somebody who is at a stage where they're really looking to advance. And so taking a step down could be seen as not the most effective use of their time at that point in their career or at that point of kind of thinking about their overall resume. So it's a little bit dependent, I believe, on the specific goals and priorities in terms of salary, balance for the family, for their, for themselves and for their families. I think there are a lot of factors to take into consideration there. But Danielle, I don't know if you have any other specific.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's very independent, and dependent on what your situation is. And there's a lot of, like you said, factors to consider.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that you talk through that, and it may not be necessary. Sometimes people sell themselves short and say, I've got to, start at the bottom in a new area where, again, what are those transferable skills? How can your experience help to position you for that position where you're articulating it, you're showcasing, I can add value from the get-go, even though I don't have XYZ experience. So that's where working with a coach can be really helpful, because it's hard to see and be objective in your own experience. And somebody listening to you, whether it's a coach or a trusted mentor or a colleague, they can see things a little bit differently and give you insights into how you could best position yourself. More questions coming in. So advice for career transitions when you have a young growing family: better to wait even if you're not satisfied in a current role? And I can take this one. I think it really depends on where you want to go in your career and what opportunities may exist at your current company. So if you are, and it's a constant push and pull. I see this a lot with young mothers and even young fathers. I want to be there with my family. I want to be with my kids. And then I also really I don't want to stall my career. How do I navigate through that? And I know we sound conflicted on that first slide for the Mentimeter in the beginning, and that's a huge source of conflict for people. And so some of it is around how supportive is your current company with young families? So there's a values question there. And if it's not as supportive as you might want it to be, there are many companies who are moving in that direction. So making a career transition when you have a young growing family could actually better serve you to be in an environment that's a better fit for you. If you're in a company that's very supportive, a lot of it is around conversations with your manager. I want to be doing these things. I want to be growing. I also feel like I want to be there for my family. Can you help me navigate? Can we pick and choose where to invest my time? So again, not necessarily a straightforward answer of this is what you need to do, but those are some of the things to evaluate. Few other questions going through here. Gosh, there's a lot coming in.
Well, and I wonder if I'm thinking a little bit about moving to the next piece because it may cover some of these questions.
Let's do it. Let's keep going. Okay.
And I put a note here that, I mentioned a couple macro and micro level ways that I conduct research or that we recommend conducting research. If there are other ways that you all stay up to date on market trends, other podcasts that you like, or specific publications that you enjoy reading, please feel free to put those in the chat. I think the information sharing on this topic can be very, very helpful. So I think one of the things that, as we consider some of these questions that are coming in, one of the things that's really important is talking to people who are doing the job that you're interested in or working at the company that you may be targeting. And there are a few important reasons for that. Sometimes it's to understand what the support looks like within that company or how they value transferable skills if you're looking to make a significant job change. But I think one of the things that's incredibly valuable as you're considering moving into a new role is that as you talk to more people within a company, you have an opportunity to access what we would refer to as the hidden job market. And what we mean by that is that these would be jobs that are not necessarily recruited for or posted in a traditional way where they are, posted on a website for months while they gather applications. It could just be a short period of time because they already have an internal or an external candidate in mind that's high priority for them because it's somebody that they may have been networking with or interacting with who they think would be a good fit for that role. And so there's a lot of research related to the hidden job market about, there's a certain percentage of jobs that you never see posted online for more than just a few days because they already have candidates in mind. And so taking that into consideration, what are ways that you can engage people in your network to make sure that you are top of mind when the ideal role at your ideal company becomes available? So there are ways that you can do that. within your current organization, as we've talked about before, raising your hand for a cross-functional project, especially if you're looking to move maybe from one department to another. How do you get people in that department to know you and the quality of your work? Well, maybe find ways to interact with them on something cross-functional, or maybe through other types of company-sponsored activities or projects. Maybe you're looking to stay within your current industry, but you want to move to another company within that industry. Professional organizations can be a great way to get to know others and understand where jobs may be opening or where there are going to be opportunities upcoming that you can kind of stay top of mind for as you interact with those hiring managers. Sometimes it's trying to decide, I'm not sure what it is that I want to do yet, but I want to interact with other wonderful and valuable professionals across different industries, and sometimes serving on a board can be a way to do just that. There are other ways that you all engage your network. Please feel free to share any of those in the chat as well. But I think, Danielle, going back to one of the questions that we received before about, taking a step down to move into the industry that you're interested in versus, going in at the same level or having a step up, is it necessary to take a few steps down in terms of title? One of the things that I tell our MBA students a lot is that if you're looking to make a really significant career transition into a new area, and that a hiring manager looking at your resume may not understand why you're looking to make a transition into a new industry or a new function because you don't have that experience yet, just applying with your resume online can be a tough way to get noticed in that process. But if you have conversations with people within that organization and you've reflected on your transferable skills and you explain why you feel like you're a good fit in order to be able to make that transition at a lateral level or even at a higher level, that's a way to be able to get your resume noticed, because you now have an advocate within the organization who can say, I can vouch for this person that can make this career transition, even if their resume may not have the exact experience, because I know they have transferable skills. So don't underestimate the value of engaging that network in order to be able to think about successfully making a career transition versus just applying to roles online. All right. I'm going to go to the last piece of this, Danielle, but I will take a look at some of the questions that are coming through.
Great.
And I'm seeing a lot of great comments here about
so much coming in, and I think I'm missing some because so I might have Nicola ask us at the end if I've missed any. We want to answer all of your questions, and so apologies if we're going to wait till the end because we want to get through all this content, and then we will try to get every single one answered.
I will call out two things as you're moving to this next thing.
Sure.
That, one question I always ask my colleagues is, who do you know that you think I should meet? I say that exact same advice to the MBAs.
Always.
I love that piece of advice. Like, leverage every interaction into the next one. Just makes it so much easier and more organic. And then employee resource groups, great opportunity for exposure and expanding your network within your organization.
Yeah, especially cross-functionally. And the thing to remember too is that people often think of their network as first degree connections. Okay, so if I'm looking at IHG hotels potentially, then I don't know anybody there, but they forget about those second degree connections, which are actually the best way to expand your network. And so let's say that I know Liz really well, and Liz is obviously working at Emory, and I want to work at Emory. I don't work at Emory right now. Then talking to Liz and saying, who else might you know at Emory that I should talk to is a wonderful way to expand your network. So don't forget about those key second degree connections. Your first degree connections know so many people. So that's a way that you can expand your network. So we're going to move into goal setting. And so this is really the piece where you compile all the things we've talked about this morning into actionable goals. So you start with understanding yourself. What are my interests? What are my values? What are my skills? And what do I like using? So some people may be really good at math, but they don't necessarily want to sit in front of a spreadsheet and analyze data all the time. So it's important to think about the skills you most enjoy using. And then compiling that with what's the market, where are there opportunities that align with my values, skills, and interests, and then mapping those together and saying, okay, I now have targets that I'm really interested in pursuing. And so I'm going to set some goals about being able to accomplish that. And so that what you do is we're going to talk through a framework of how do you actually set intentional goals. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. It's the SMART framework, where you're focused on a specific goal, that it's measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So we saw a lot of comments come in of, do I stay, do I leave? Do I pursue something totally different and have to start over, or can I pivot at the same level? So when you're setting actionable goals based on where you currently are, I just saw somebody would love to connect with IHG also. Yeah, it's a popular Atlanta company, right? So it's really starts with, what is that goal I'm trying to achieve, and how do I answer these questions? And so maybe talking about networking, I'm going to connect with someone at IHG. It's a specific goal. Measurable, how will you know when you've achieved this goal? You've had a conversation. Is it attainable? Do you know people, first or second degree connections, that are working at a company you're interested in at IHG? Is this goal significant to your life? Is it relevant? Well, yes, because I want to work there. So this is something that I want to pursue. And then when are you going to achieve it? This is actually the part where people fall short a lot. They make these vague goals of, I want to talk to someone at IHG, but they don't necessarily do the research and see, who do I know who can connect me, and when am I going to do it? So I'm going to do it by December 15th. And so you've set that goal for yourself. You've put it on your calendar. You're holding yourself accountable. Connect on LinkedIn. Absolutely. So there's LinkedIn is such an amazing tool. So this is just an example that we put together to help you see how you could create a SMART goal. So let's say that you have identified project management as a career path you would like to pursue. You know that to be able to do that, you have to get a PMP certification. So specific, you want to gain your certification in project management. And so you're going to research different project management programs. There's several that are out there, which ones are reputable, which are going to be in the area I really want to focus in on. I'm going to give myself 2 weeks to do that, maybe within the next week, whatever your time frame is to be able to commit to. And then attainable. So if you're pursuing project management, you want to make sure that this is actually a job that you can attain. And so have you evaluated your skills? Are you good at organizational skills? Do you like managing cross-functional projects? Do you understand the key elements of project management? And so, ensuring this is that self-reflection piece, that this is an attainable goal. And then it's relevant because to be able to get a project management role, you need that certification, whether it's currently at your company or outside of your company. And then lastly, like I mentioned, time bound. So having that concrete deadline of when you're going to achieve it is really helpful in making sure that you are moving towards that goal.
Yeah. So thinking about this, if any of you after this session do a bit of maybe a skills assessment of yourself, and what is a skill that I need to grow in order to be able to move to the next role, setting a SMART goal for yourself on how to move to that next step in attaining experience in that skill. Or I need to expand my network in order to be able to think about, moving to the next position. How can you make a SMART goal around doing some networking and setting up some chats with people within your organization or within your industry? So hopefully this framework can help you think about the next step. I know there are still so many questions coming in, and so maybe we can go to this last piece and then open it up to Q&A after that, if that works for you, Danielle.
And there's some funny comments out there too. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So why don't we
entertaining bunch?
I love it. So I think how we wanted to at least end kind of the formal part of this presentation is, we started with like one word that is describing how you're feeling today. We'd like to know, what is one action item that you're taking from today's session? We talked about the importance of reflecting on your values, reflecting on your goals, reflecting on your skills, doing research, listening to podcasts, talking to people, using LinkedIn, so many different things that we mentioned. I'd like to know, for those of you that are attending, if you have any specific action items. So feel free to scan the QR code again. I will pull up the slide in just a second, and I'd be curious to hear some of the things that you all plan to take away after this session. All right, let's see here. One action item. So please feel free to type them in. And if you're seeing
the old screen, there should be, the presenter has advanced to the next slide at the top, so that will enable you to see this next question.
Yes, here we go. Defining values. Love it. I feel like that's a really fun exercise I find it interesting to reflect on your values. Yeah.
And there's a great values assessment that we
Emailing Al.
provide. Yes, I know who put
Spending
that
more
in.
time
He's
on
funny.
LinkedIn.
He's funny.
I think that's great.
These are great. Emailing Al. Al, I think you're famous now.
Reaching out to colleagues, building a SMART goal for career transition, continuous learning, specific time to work on my goal. You know, a big piece of this is honestly just setting aside the time. If your one next step is that I'm going to put an hour on the calendar the first week of December to just spend time doing some research and thinking about goals, just putting that time on the calendar is a good next step. Because
so important.
Sometimes it's just about finding the time to do it.
Prioritize yourselves. Make sure that you are giving that time to you, just like you're giving it to everybody else around you, whether it's your work or your family or you know, I know people are spread so thin, but taking that 30 minutes to really prioritize yourself makes your life better for others too, makes you show up better because you feel like you're getting your needs met. So put it on your calendar.
Yeah. Oh gosh, somebody mentioned about, you know, like the fear of failure. That is something that we're talking about all the time. You know, how do you assess risk when it comes to career transition, and how do you understand yourself so you think about what those risks can be, but what those benefits can be as well. So talking to others who have made similar career transitions can help to figure out how comfortable you feel with the different risks involved with this. A lot of people are going to listen to podcasts after this. I love it.
Yay!
I as an avid podcast listener, I think that's great.
This is a really entertaining group. Yeah, I think that you all are spot on. And so all of these things are good. And we do have a resources slide where we provide some actionable next steps for you, assessments you can take, research tools you can use. So these are wonderful. I'm glad that you're finding some concrete things you can take action on as a next step. First attempt in learning is an acronym for FAIL. That's great. Where can we find the assessment? We're going to show you.
Yeah, I'll how about I switch to that right now, because I also see Nicola coming back. We're going to have some questions. So
that's great.
We'll put these in the chat so you have them, but Danielle and I went and looked through a few different resources that we think could be valuable for at least those first two steps that we talked about, understanding yourself and doing interest, skills, and values assessment. There's a great website called Career One Stop for that. And then we'll say it again, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool if you want to understand the market, to see maybe different career paths that work with your current skill set, or looking at some data around where certain skills are growing or declining in the market. And that can help you with shaping goals that are going to ultimately be more effective. So
for those of you in the Goizueta community, the Goizueta Business Library is an outstanding resource for a lot of different research tools. Your public libraries are also great resources. So these were just just a few to get you started. There's much more out there, but we hope that this can give you a place to just begin the process.
Absolutely. And Tammy, I saw put those in the chat, so you all have access to them. Please feel free to click on them and look at them later if that would be helpful to you as you're thinking about your next steps.
So Liz and Danielle, it sounds like this has been a really successful business over breakfast, and lots of energy around the subject matter, which is fabulous. I love the one about get off your butt and taking time for yourself. That's so important. There are some questions. There are some in the chat that still are on.
I saw one in the chat that I wanted to go back to, Nicola, if that's all right.
Yeah, do you have it?
I do. It was one person wrote about how do you recommend reaching out to someone in your network who you may not have communicated with for a number of years, which I thought was a really good question, because I think for some people who may attend a session like this, like, where do I get started? You know, whether it's somebody that you've talked to recently or somebody you haven't talked to in years, you kind of are providing the reason for your outreach, you know, as a way to make that connection. And the way that I've done this in the past is to say, you know, hi, person A, I've been doing some research on making a career transition into a new industry. I know we haven't connected in a few years, but I see that you have been working at company X for the last 5 years. And I am really curious about the work that you're doing. I'd love to take you out for coffee and understand about your career path for the last several years. People love talking about themselves. So just saying, like, this is the reason I'm reaching out, because I want to hear about you, how you're doing and what your career path is. That is a completely reasonable reason to follow up with somebody. Now, where I would say maybe, be a little bit more cautious. Don't necessarily reach out to a contact you haven't talked to in 10 years and ask them for a referral. Maybe start with the conversation first and then move into the stage where maybe they would be able to refer you to a position. That would be my advice. But Danielle, I heard you about to say something.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's addressing it and saying, I know we haven't been in touch in a long time. I'd love to reconnect. And I, saw that you're working in XYZ industry or XYZ company, and I'm really intrigued about, learning more about your experiences. So I think the key there is the authenticity. You may want to reconnect with them on a personal level too. And it's okay to say that. I'd love to reconnect. We haven't been in touch in a long time. And when I was doing my research and I saw you were working at this company, I was excited to see your name. I want to reconnect. So I wouldn't hesitate to reach out and just be honest and address it like Liz said.
Yeah. And I think when people get outreach from others and that person reaching out assumes that you have information and value to share, like that you are a subject matter expert in some way, usually they're the type of people that are going to be happy to engage in that outreach. There's a book that we recommend to the MBAs a lot called The 2-Hour Job Search, which talks a little bit about that outreach process. And so if anybody is looking to understand a bit more about, doing that outreach via LinkedIn and how to be effective in that, especially with people that are not first connections that you talk to on a regular basis, that book can also be a helpful resource.
Yeah. In fact, that happened to me just last week.
Yeah.
I reached out and said, can I have lunch with you? I'm thinking about my next career step, which is like 2-3 years time. And I want to understand, something about the education industry.
Yeah. Oh, I saw somebody write, what color is your parachute in the chat. That is definitely a book that Danielle and I have talked about. A favorite career development book for sure. Richard
Bowles. Oh yeah. It's such an old staple of career evaluation and assessment. It's great. I think he has a website. He's passed on, but he has a website out there too that has a lot of great resources. Yeah.
So there is another question that came in around how can one expand your views, experience, network, even within the same company?
Yeah, so I think it's all about networking. And so how do you tap into your own department, and getting your manager support on this? I think sometimes people can be shy about talking to their manager about wanting to grow or wanting to move in a different direction. It obviously is dependent on the relationship you have with your manager, but they can be one of your best advocates. So sometimes you can start with your manager, have that conversation, and then all the things that we've talked about with looking at different cross-functional projects. Can you raise your hand to participate in those? Are there business resource groups or interest groups that are part of your organization that you can join? Are there different ways you can become a leader on different projects? If there's volunteer activities that your company does, how do you get involved in those? So it really is a question of, again, I'm going to say starting with where do you want to go, so you're intentional about how you're spending your time, and how are you expanding your network and getting to know different people across departments, so you're building a reputation. And we didn't get into this so much about your professional brand, but it is a huge part of your success in your career. And so, how are you intentionally showing up, being authentic, showing them the value that you bring? And you never know what opportunities could present when you start to build those relationships.
Yeah. And the other piece of that is that I think I've definitely noticed in the different roles that I've been in, people within my department or my group who already are doing a good job of reaching out kind of beyond our department or group. They join the employee resource groups, they are involved in cross-functional projects, they do a good job of on a regular basis networking with other people within the organization. And so even going to them for advice. How did you get started on this? What do you recommend? What activities have you been involved in that you found to be most valuable just to get to know other people within the organization? Looking for guides and mentors that are kind of part of your small network can be really helpful to have the push to get started.
And I know we're short on time, and I just want to make 2 more points. I saw this come through in the chat. Holidays are a great time to reconnect. So this is something that, Thanksgiving coming up or the holidays in December, reaching out now to people you may not have been in touch with, where you don't need anything from them, just reconnecting. It's a really great way to keep that network alive. And then secondly, when you're thinking about, how do you want to work with your manager? I saw somebody put in here, managers and supervisors must become coaches. Absolutely. And there's some managers that are great at it. There's some managers that may need some development, but that's a whole separate webinar. But, as you come across different topics or articles or podcasts, share with your network. So that's another way that you can stay front and center in a way that's not asking for something. And it's okay to ask. I don't want anybody to walk away saying I can't do an informational interview and get insight, but there's also ways you can give. And so if you see an article that's really relevant, you think it's important to your network, share it proactively. And then when you do want to ask something and you do have a question, it feels a lot more comfortable because you've already been giving.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I've heard an executive say, never have lunch by yourself.
Yeah.
Now that and you can do that by Zoom, or you can do that if you're in person, but that like challenge yourself to always have lunch with somebody. I'm not very good at that, but anyway, it's another thing that just helps you connect into your organization and find out things that you wouldn't necessarily find out. We are out of time. I mean, there's lots of questions, and so let's keep the conversation going. And thanks, Gary, for your plug for Business Over Breakfast as a way of keeping current and keeping on top of things. So thank you so much, Liz and Danielle. And then Tammy, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Liz and Danielle. What an awesome session. I think we could have went another hour just on this alone. So a lot of people are interested in how to take charge of your career. So really great information. Looking ahead, what we want to share is our next webinar session will take place on December the 1st. We're going to stay in that HR realm. So we're today focused on you specifically. We're going to be talking about building a diverse pipeline of talent, specifically how do we identify problems and exploring the solutions in that area. And then on December the 15th, this is going to be our last Business Over Breakfast webinar session of the year. So it's going to be a year in review. We're going to be having a panel discussion. It's going to be talking about the impact on our work and our lives. So stay tuned for more information on those two, but we hope that you can join us on those days. And then we'd also like to encourage you to join us for some short courses in our open enrollment programs. We have a executive decision-making course that's taking place on December 12th and 13th. It's going to provide you with the tools to help you evaluate decision-making process to deliver better outcomes for yourself and your organization. And then on December the 14th and 15th, Finance and Accounting for Non-Financial Managers. It's a great course to help you to strengthen your understanding of financial statements and also to really understand finance and accounting. So if you need some help in those areas, this is a great course for you to take. I also want to make you aware of our extended learning courses. These are diverse offerings of our 4-credit courses that are offered through Goizueta Business School that are available for executive education participants. These courses will take place in the spring, January 9th through April the 4th. You must apply for these. The deadline for application is December the 5th. But we would encourage you, if you're interested or thinking about getting an MBA, these are MBA courses. You will be sitting in classrooms with our evening and executive MBA students, taking the same information, exams. You will also earn a grade and official transcript. So again, if you're interested in any of these courses, feel free to reach out to us or contact me directly. There's my email address located at the bottom. but love to see you in one of our courses going forward. Again, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you on December the 1st. Again, thank you, Liz and Danielle, for this great presentation and information that you shared with us today. Everyone, again, have an awesome Thanksgiving holiday, safe travels if you're getting on the road, and we hope to see you again on December the 1st. Thank you and have a great day.